What is up, VFX people, ghouls, gamers, everybody in between? I'm here to present you a new form of content on this channel where I have a guest and we talk about VFX and we give you advice on getting a job in the industry, interviews, portfolio stuff, all that. It's going to be very much second monitor content while you're doing something else. Feel free not to stare at the screen the whole time. I'm going to be showing just random effects that myself and the guest have worked on. So if you need some advice, if it sounds like a good time, keep watching, enjoy. I will pass it on to Etienne now, who is the first guest on the channel, and I hope you enjoy.
Hey, I'm Etienne Brassard. I'm a 24-year-old VFX artist from Canada. I currently work at Swint Bennett Studio. I'm working on deceiving. Soon we'll be moving to somewhere else, who's completely like secret for the moment. But yeah, been doing. Before that, I was at Ubisoft on Immortals Phoenix Rising, and I worked about 11 months, and I have about 4 years of experience in the industry, and I've been working as a solo VFX artist slash tech artist on Deceiving for like the past 3 years and like 1 week. So yeah, uh,
Sick. Love to hear it. Uh, People on the channel should know who I am, but I also I think this is the first time I've like done a face video. So hey, what's up? You can see my face on Twitter on my picture, but it's a big face reveal here. So I am Brandon. I've been working in the industry for roughly 3 years now, officially, like, from my first gig. Um, I'm solo VFX on all the jobs I've done, and I currently work with Shiny Shoe on Inkbound. So, this video, we're roughly going to be talking about building up your skills and resources and portfolio to help you understand what it actually takes to get into the industry and all that good stuff. So let's just jump right into some questions. I'll let you answer first on these. So, how did you get started in VFX?
so I was in college for 3D animation. So we barely did any real-time VFX before the third year. And at this point, I knew I was like a more, like definitely more technical. At first, I wanted to do character. Then I was like, there's always someone that's telling you shouldn't do characters because it's the most like it's what everyone wants to do. Everyone wants to do cool characters and whatever. So I was like, oh, I might still want to work with characters. So I would do rigging and wanted to be at some point like somewhat of a character tech artist like slash TD. And afterwards I realized I hated skinning, so I didn't do that, and that's where I kind of stumbled upon the like Diablo VFX tech art talks, the GDC talks for VFX and things like that, and that's when I started doing VFX. So that was at the beginning of my third year of school. I was about 19, so that's when I started, and it kind of just clicked. I realized I remember really well going to one of my teachers, like desk and like office, and being like, hey, I think I'm gonna do VFX. And he was like, I see you doing like real-time VFX. I knew I wanted to do games, uh and so the since I knew I wanted to do games and not like film, like there was never a question of doing like film VFX. So I just started like in Unreal, whatever, and then put a lot of time into it. I think, and then once I finished the year, I had like a pretty decent portfolio, and got a job at Ubisoft right away. I think that's pretty much it.
Wow, that's nice. Got a job right away.
Yeah.
It took me longer. I was probably, I don't know, I didn't go so hard on my portfolio as I should have. But I got started pretty much a couple years after high school. I was like, I want to work in games. I don't want to work weird jobs the rest of my life for not great money, so I decided I was going to actually pull the trigger and work on games. And I was like, I have to go to school because this is what people do to get into the industry. So I I went to a I'll just go ahead and tear down the school because I don't think they're great. I went to Full Sail, not a great school, didn't enjoy it. um, I didn't learn that much. but I was aiming to be a prop artist. Not even like hero props. I just wanted to make props. I just wanted to make chairs and plants and stuff like that. Like, and maybe the occasional hero prop. But uh, as I was in school, I was doing commission work. I was doing um, VR chat, avatars, and VFX. That's where I picked up VFX. Really, I had messed with particle systems before because I had been screwing around with Unity when I was in high school and stuff, and I knew what a particle system was. I remember doing like default particle and then like doing a color over lifetime on it and being like, "That's a fireball! Oh my god, that looks so sick." It did not. It looked terrible, but I started doing it more and more with these because people would want like replicas of like I did one that was like Virgil from Devil May Cry 4. Somebody wanted that and they wanted some of his moves, some of his VFX from the game, and I was like, I could figure out. Yes, pay me, I'll figure it out. So I would take the commissions on stuff I had no idea how to do, and then I would just learn it on the fly. And I was like, I really like VFX. I think this is something I could actually do. So that's when I decided to start taking VFX seriously and learning that on the side with schoolwork, and that was kind of a lot. So I eventually was like, I had like 6 or 7 months left in college for my bachelor's, and I was like, you know what? This is too much stress. I'm just going to take the associates and I'm just going to focus on VFX because I don't need to finish out this modeling game art degree. I've learned enough. I learned how to use Maya and make a couple meshes and UV map, and that's like the essentials for VFX part of it at least. And animation sometimes you animate a mesh or whatever, and but I normally do all animations in Unity anyway. I don't do that much animating in Maya. But yeah, that's how I got started. And I guess this can lead into the next question here. What was your first VFX related job, and did you feel confident going into it at the time?
I so my first, as I said, my first VFX related job was at UB. I didn't do like I didn't do any commission work before. I really just did like I finishing it. There was like a portfolio reviews that they were doing at Ubisoft. And there was the thing with VFX. It's not like props where there's like 15 people that want to do it in your year. There's gonna be like one or two, maybe. So I was the only one on the portfolio day for the Ubisoft thing that was doing VFX. So they kind of took me in another, like the second time I did it, they just took me in another room and they were like, "Do you want like we're gonna throw you an art test. We like what you did here." And I was doing this art test, didn't pan out to work, but then as soon as I finished school, I got an email from a recruiter and they were just like, "Hey, dude, like we have a role open. Do you want it?" And I was like, "Okay." Didn't have to do like interviews because I had done interviews before with school. Um, and I don't actually remember how confident I was. I think I was a little bit cocky at that time. And I felt I had done a lot of research. So kind of knew my stuff a lot. Uh, but I was still really insecure about a lot of stuff. I would ask a lot of questions. I wanted to learn. And I think that's what's important is that you understand that I think it's important to work with people that are kind of smarter than you at the beginning and being open to feedback. And I think I wasn't the best at that at that point. So kind of yeah, I was confident, maybe a little bit too much. But then got a lot better through working with people more and then learning to manage feedback and gather feedback because sometimes it's weird. You can say, "Oh, this does not is not punchy enough," and like, what do you mean punchy? Is it like what curve do I have to tweak for it to look more punchy? Is it the color curve? Is it the scale curve? Is it the just the timing in general? So yeah, I don't think I was that confident. I knew I had a decently good portfolio and being catched uh by UB like just after school made me feel comfortable about me in general. And I still don't feel that confident about my skill in VFX because I did like now that I'm swapping between tech art and VFX, I feel like I kind of split and that people you see a lot of the I don't know if you see a lot of the like Chinese portfolio or whatever that
Oh
are
my god,
just
I
like
always talk
insane.
about them.
Yeah,
They're insane, and I love it.
yeah,
I take so much inspiration from them, and it's always like, I don't know what the text says here, but this looks insane.
yeah.
I love
Or
it.
you see like breakdown of like after, or they sometimes they do stuff in After Effects, and you see the breakdown, and you're like, I have no idea what they did, but it looks cool. And
Yeah,
yeah,
they a lot of the just the Asian VFX artists in general, they use that website CG CG Well, I think is what it's called, where they all post everything and they'll post breakdowns and stuff. But Google Translate's not enough to figure out
no,
what's going on.
Google
So
Lens doesn't like it either. So,
yeah, so
how,
I can't figure out what it is, but they're doing awesome and I love it.
so your first VFX related job was commission work, I feel.
Kind of. I don't consider it that. I'll dive into it. So I don't know. It wasn't. It was good for learning, and it's so nice when you can get paid to learn, and that's why I really like doing commission work and taking on work that I don't know how to do, and I would just tell them I could do it, and then I could get paid to learn
So you
how to
were
do it,
confident
and
that you were able to do it at
I
first.
was confident I could learn. I've always been very confident that I can learn like whatever is thrown at me. So I was confident there. Sometimes probably too confident. I made some really bogus looking stuff, but the customers were always satisfied with the VFX in the end. So my first official job was working with Studio Dry Dock on Wildflowers, which I'm repping my Wildflowers hoodie, which was an Apple Arcade, not exclusive. It was a launch. On launch, it was exclusive to Apple Arcade, but it was only for a certain amount of time. Then we were able to move it to other platforms. But it's a real successful game. I'm really happy with what the team did. And was I confident? Kind of. I was confident because the style was stylized, and that's where I'm comfortable with. And the thing I wasn't confident about was the, I guess, my approach. Because when you're making stuff for yourself and you're doing it for a portfolio, you're not concerned about performance. You're not concerned about any of that stuff. And when I did the interview with them, they were like, "Hey, so we're gonna try not to use a ton of alpha because this is a mobile game." And I was like, "Okay, I can work around that. I could replace particles with meshes or whatever to avoid alpha, too much of it." And I wasn't super confident going into that, but it was so funny because the thing that really got them to notice me. I just had my portfolio. So they approached me. I didn't apply for this job. They approached me on ArtStation. They got my email from there and saw my portfolio because they were looking. And they were like, "Hey, we think your stuff's really good. Whatever, you know, we think you'd be a good fit. Do you want to do an interview?" And I was like, "Yeah, please." I was working at a warehouse at the time, just like throwing boxes on a conveyor belt. And I was like, "Please, I will just pay me anything. I'll work in a game." So I did the interview, whatever. Um, I ended up having to do an art test after talking to them for a little bit because they could tell I've never worked in a game before. So they wanted to see proof that I could do the things for them that they needed. So I did it and they were impressed and I landed the job and I was super stoked. And it was a contract gig. It was for a little less than a year. So it was kind of stressful. Like, yes, I'm in the industry, but I'm only in it for this amount of time unless I have something lined up afterwards. And so, yeah, after that, I landed where I am now, since I've only really been in the industry for 3 years. So luckily, Shiny Shoe was hiring around the time that my contract was up with Dry Dock. So, but yeah,
Did you
it
apply for
was.
that, or did they contact you?
I applied for Shiny Shoe. Yeah, they posted on Work with Indies, and I was like, finally. Every day I was checking Work with Indies because I was like, please, not many VFX positions available at any given time necessarily for indies, especially because I think there's so few of us that the people that do have jobs tend to stick where they're at for a
Mhm.
while, and you don't need 10 VFX artists. You only need like one
No.
or two at most. So it's like those people stick around, and I think that's why it's hard for. Which is why a company like Drydock, who was fresh at the time, they were totally new, is a lot of people that used to work at a kind of subsidiary side thing for EA. It's like Fire or something. I don't know. Whatever that team was called. A lot of them worked from there. They left there and they formed Dry Dock, and so it was a fresh company. They were looking for others that were fresh, And that happens a lot of times with newer companies or whatever. They'll look for newer artists because one, let's be honest, budget's better for hiring a newer artist who can do the work, but you don't have to pay crazy because they're not 10-year veterans in the industry or whatever. So getting a job as a VFX artist, a new one, isn't too bad if you find the right indie studio or whatever, or even AAA places. They like to just stock up. You'll see like
Yeah, sometimes
two or
they
three
do.
positions come up at the same time for VFX, and they're just looking to build extra numbers. Maybe they're trying to divide their team a bit or whatever. So a lot of companies will adopt early people to kind of shape them into what they need. So
So
yeah,
for here particularly, I believe, and that's gonna sound uh pretty bad on my end, but I think I had one of the strongest portfolio in VFX that was out there in the last like maybe 3 to 4 years. I've seen what people were hired with, and it was usually a lot less uh like they probably were a lot less knowledgeable than I was at that point because I did do like the 6 months and I before that I had worked in like I was working in Blender at like 13 years old and like Unity and I did class for like I taught kids Unity too a little bit so I'm able to learn pretty quickly so it went pretty well and they hired other people because there's like a need for VFX artists and there's a need uh for them to teach new VFX artists because that's like it's a specialized job and it's tricky to get sometimes. So they do teach new people when they have the profile for it. So I did have a good thing. So I was lucky for that. That I think both of us were lucky that we didn't have really we kind of didn't go through the whole applying to jobs and getting denied process at
yeah,
first.
a good portfolio can get you in. It's just a bit of luck with it. And it was funny because the effect that got me, I forgot to say this earlier, the effect that got me the attention that I needed was something that someone else had told me was actually this is public, so I'll say it was Ben from VFX Apprentice. Ben, I think I had him like, or I had everybody in the VFX Apprentice thing take a look at my stuff and be like, "What do you think? I'm looking for stuff." And Ben was like, "This probably needs to go. It doesn't really fit with the rest of your stuff." And I was like, "Okay, I like it, but it was a stylized rain effect, which I actually did a tutorial on later. It's basically the same effect I did before. It's not on my portfolio anymore because of Ben, but but that was the thing that they saw. They were like, this rain would look perfect in our game. So it's like that's what got me it, and I love that. And so it just goes to show the weakest part of your portfolio could be the thing that because it was just a looping GIF of the rain. That's why it wasn't a stellar thing to have on the
Mhm.
portfolio. And we'll talk about portfolios soon and why looping effects you shouldn't have too many of those on your portfolio. But yeah, so I removed it, but that was the thing that got me the job. And at Shiny Shoe, another thing that is a looping effect actually got me the job, or got me some good attention there. I have like loot beams, like loot beam rarity effects on my
Mhm.
portfolio, and it's just a looping effect. But they were like, "That's the kind of game we're making. That's that's it. Let's contact him, or let's look deeper into him." Since I applied, they're like, "I love that." So I don't know, man. Don't have too many looping effects on there, but some of them can get you a
But
job, I guess. It's more about having the knowledge of who you're applying for
yeah,
anyway. It's like
exactly. That's what
Wildflowers was a cozy little like farming witch game, so of course they're gonna have cute little stylized rain effects and stuff. And then Inkbound is it's a there's loot. It's like an RPG kind of. It's a roguelike, but there's stuff you pick up and you got loot rarity beams. So it's like that resonated. I think that's important. So let's go ahead and dive into talking about portfolios since we're already on it. What do you think makes a good portfolio
I
in general?
uh one thing uh I'm really picky about portfolio and that's not even VFX's presentation. I feel there's a lot of like effects on black backgrounds and things like that and I just try to stay away from that as much as possible. Either I go for like setting up a quick like really messy atmosphere or a sky sphere shader and do something with that to have like a backdrop and or I use in my recent portfolio in my the portfolio I did after Ubisoft I used like Unreal's training like meshes kind of as a setup,
Yeah.
and I like you can play an effects on its own, but then I would have like animation on top and like having like a small cannon because I wanted to do an explosion, uh, and things like that, and it just looks better. Just feels like it's in a game, kind of, just feels more integrated. It feels like it can be in the game more. And that's kind of the things that I'm looking at. I had effects that were just like more cinematic and that a lot of people like. That I'm like, it's cool, but I don't like this about it, or I don't like this about it. Um, but to me, my portfolio is about a minute long. It's a couple piece, shows that I can do timing, textures, and that I understand like basic principles, and that I can do something a little bit more like stuff that's a little bit more crazy. I uh, hate schoolwork and portfolios in anything. I
Yeah. Never put your schoolwork in your portfolio.
unless it's insane and it's a project that's like um pretty free. Like you can do a VFX for something. Like I had something that was like do a teleportation VFX, but you can choose any Dota character and kind of have it fit the character. So that was like
Oh,
kind of
that's
good.
cool.
You can do a blink, you could do a dash, you could do teleportation. So it will look pretty different for everyone. So that works. But I've seen people do like having going to like a portfolio review for like or having a portfolio day or where they present the school presents their portfolio and having like two of the same exact dirt bike or like two of the same like the same way there would be two of the same VFX. I don't really like it because if I see both of them, you're either risking me comparing the two or just sometimes it's just like it's half done half baked, like you had the strict deadlines, so you can't really polish as much. But working on personal work is real important, and then catering to the studio you're doing work for. Uh, when I was interviewing for the studio I'm gonna join soon, uh, quickly I was like, hey, this is my portfolio, whatever. And then after we talked for the first like screening interview, and then we had the second interview because screening interviews are basically a joke. They're just looking if you're like if you have a cool portfolio, they're just basically looking if you're not a serial killer. Like it's somewhat easy depending. Like they're sometimes not there when you're like for a smaller, and sometimes you don't even have a screening interview if you're not like if you're applying directly, you probably won't have that. It was before because I was referred by someone else. um, so I like after the first interview, I would be like, "Hey, this would kind of fit in the game." And then I did like a 4 hour VFX, uh, threw it at them and did like, "Hey, we talk about this element that could be interesting in your game. I've made this for the saving in that way," and then send them a little video. So just doing a lot more than what's was expected. I already had a portfolio, and then just doing like, "Hey, this is kind of for you. So this is kind of how this is scope for my initial portfolio, but just like you can do, you can add stuff to your portfolio and mix it per studio. And I think
Yeah,
that's
that shows a lot of interest in the company too. They're gonna like seeing that. I don't know. Some people might see that as like doing the most, doing too much, but like, it's nice to be like, I'm applying for working on Hearthstone. Here's a card game effect. Like, you might as well prepare one. I did that. I applied for. I interviewed with Dominic from Hearthstone, and I did prepare a card effect with that. It wasn't great. It's not on my portfolio, but that probably didn't help me. But make sure it's good if you're going to do something
yeah.
like that. My skills were definitely not as good back then, and a big part of that was when I worked on Wildflowers. I didn't make our shaders. Uh, that was all done by our lead programmer, and that I felt pretty restricted by that, because that's such a big part of VFX and there was no post processing, so it's like Bloom was out of the question, which there are ways around that, of course, but Bloom is pretty clean when you could use it
Yeah.
for glows and
I
stuff, as long
have
as you're
been
not
told.
overdoing it. Don't over Bloom.
I have been
But
told I sometimes overbloom a little bit, but I
yeah,
tried to.
I'm also guilty. Everybody is. We all love just like a bright bloom. I still have too much of it on my portfolio, but the yeah, and what you were saying about presentation, um, Yeah, I agree 100%. Don't look at my portfolio. It's got a lot of black backgrounds,
That's
but that was because I work so quickly with VFX. Like I don't take that much time on each piece when I should necessarily, but like in the industry as well, you don't have 12 hours to spend on an effect normally. So it's like I almost feel good about moving quickly because this is realistic work for a game. It's like
I think
so I don't
yeah.
put the time into an environment a lot of the times. I'll just throw I'll throw a black screen. I don't care. You should do like a mid gray or something if you're going to do that just because it's more realistic. But,
I
it does read better on black. So I like to grab your attention even though it's not realistic. But
my
yeah.
my portfolio, if I my when left UB, I think it was a month per effect that I spent. It was
Oh my
insane.
God.
It was like 3 weeks each, or 2 or 3 weeks each. So like
Oh,
nearly
jeez.
80 hours. But then I was learning new stuff. I was learning Niagara at the same time. So I was like doing a lot more. For me, 12 hours for VFX isn't too bad. I kind of do that. Like I've done that a
Sheesh.
lot, but I think I'll have to get speedier with time, and I'm still getting speedier. Like I have
Yeah,
stuff that people think is looks amazing that I've done in like 5 minutes. You just copy two images that you've already done, switch some colors, and then switch your timings, and you have an effects in like 15
oh
minutes.
yeah. Once you make sparks, you never got to make them again. You
I make
just
them.
grab that emitter
I
and
am a
you make them
weird.
every time.
Yes, I will make them every time, and I will not do that in my next project. I will do a single spark emitter and copy that everywhere, and
Yeah,
switch.
yeah. You can make a couple presets. You could do a, sphere emitter or a cone or whatever and just reuse
Mm,
those. But yeah, that's a trap you can get into too is remaking a lot of stuff like flashes. You don't need to make 100 flashes. You
mm.
you, you got one flash. You can just use that and change the color,
On this evening, I did. I think I did everything custom, or nearly
Oh,
everything custom, and that's not something I want to do again. And but
yeah.
for portfolio, you can be pretty stupid about how you work,
Oh
like
yeah.
it
Sure.
because people will
It
not.
doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Nobody's waiting on you.
Um, but definitely one thing that's is if you think something is, I think for you, for me, it's really like if I think something is not good enough for my portfolio, I will not put it. And uh, because I've been with uh like reviews of portfolio where we're like this is his worst effect and we don't know why you put it there, and this tells a lot about where they are artistically, and I was like this is harsh, like this is kind of harsh, but I
Yeah.
do agree with it. And using reference is kind of, I don't personally, I or barely, I go with feelings of like this fire should feel like this, and I will look a little bit of fire, but I don't have like a pure ref or a mural board that I look at a lot, which that's something I want to get better at. Um, and but do look at reference, because if your fire is not the right speed, that's something that people are gonna feel a lot, and that a lot of like
Yeah,
art
and it's
directors are.
tricky too because sometimes you want fire to be slow and calm. Sometimes you want it if it's like if it's an ambient fire, you do want it to be a little slower or calmer feeling. And then, if you're doing like a fireball effect, you want that to be like fast and vicious looking. So it's like it's kind of context based too. I don't really look at reference. I don't concept either. That's a big thing. I don't concept hardly anything. I just get in there and start throwing stuff together and I I will look at reference sometimes, I guess. If I'm making like ice effects, then I'll look on ArtStation. I'll see how other people have done it and like think how I can change it to suit my style better or how I would do it. So it's good to compare yourself, but number one thing is don't watch an ice spike YouTube tutorial from Gabriel's channel and then put that on your portfolio.
Yeah.
It's like
Or
use it as
MFX, or
reference.
yeah, these guys that are like
Yeah, yeah.
copying tutorials is, we've seen
It's a
them.
no-no, and
l-
everybody knows it.
Yeah, we've copy like I was gonna say copying CGI tutorials.
Yep.
Don't I don't Not gonna say anything,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think there's some stuff to be learned about like I think there's good about like CGI and things about how there's like newer stuff sometimes for Unreal, and then there's sometimes not all tutorials are super heavily optimized and like really game ready, and sometimes you won't
Oh,
know.
that's a huge thing.
Yeah,
It's none of these stuff like a lot I'm not bashing like Gabriel's videos or anything, but like and or mine too. Mine aren't game ready necessarily. I'm giving you the bones to work on, make some stuff for yourself. You know, it's like my stuff's probably not super game ready. I know a lot of other tutorials like Gabriel's and stuff, like they work in the context of this video, and in a portfolio it even works. But this stuff doesn't work in game. This is not how you'll do it in a real job. Like, just off the top of my head, Gabriel has a like fire hailstorm kind of effect that he did recently where it's like meteors coming down from the sky, but it's like you wouldn't implement it like that. If it was truly meteors falling from the sky dealing damage, you wouldn't have a big AoE emitter that throws these down. You
No.
probably wouldn't, like, these are going to be spawned individually by your programmer. You know, it's like probably. I mean, they're
Yeah.
probably not doing the damage calculations in your effects. They're not placing like hitboxes on
Yeah.
each thing and
No.
having. They're not going to do that. So it's going to be different once you start implementing stuff of your own. So you got to know that stuff, which you can learn that stuff once you
Are you
start. You
doing
know, they'll
your
tell
own?
you how they're going to do it.
Are you doing your own? I feel like for Unity VFX, you're gonna be less implementing your stuff by yourself because it's code based a lot, or Blitz
Yeah,
something.
it is. That's the nice part about like Unreal is like blueprints. I could probably learn those
Because
and
I've
learn implementation.
Yeah, I've always implemented my old stuff. I was at UB, I was implementing them. At Sweet Bandits, I was implementing everything. Like
Yeah, I don't do that.
I just don't do C++, but I do every blueprint. I'll be like, hey, I need this event, and then I'll work around it. I need this value.
Right.
I need
So,
like this charge amount. Like, how much is this? Well, fireball. There's
yeah.
no fireball in deceiving, so I'm not gonna leak everything, but anything. But like this fireball should like goes from 0 to 1 in terms of chart. Well, I need that value because I'll need to scale the effects accordingly, maybe, and then I do a lerp or something.
Yeah, and then you can grab that value and plug it directly into your
Yeah.
effects with Niagara or whatever. I don't do that as much. I could if we like if that's how we wanted to do it, I would, and it would be nice a lot of the time. Like if I wanted to be able to ramp intensity or even, you know, if the range on something is variable, it's not just a set range, it would be nice to be able to grab the range data and plug it into, you would have to do VFX graph. You can't really do this stuff in like Shuriken, you know? So it's like that stuff would be nice, but we just don't. We don't.
We've had
We're so far into our own system, you know. It's like we don't go back and change stuff like that. So now we basically use the scriptable objects in Unity, which I don't know if you know about those, but they're little bits of reusable code basically where you can slot stuff in like an ability. We have a scriptable object for abilities, and then I can take my effects. It knows to accept effects prefabs who has, you know, they have all the information you need in them, and you just plug it in, you slot it into that ability, and now when that ability does the thing, it will fire on the tag and the animation, whatever, and that prefab is basically a holder for the effects. And so I can make those prefabs that hold the effects, and you know, I can adjust everything like when it fires. Does it fire right at the beginning? Does it fire on this impact tag in the ability? Whatever. But yeah, I don't do much of the like extra implementation. Like I would never be like, you know, coming up with my own solutions on how this should be implemented. That's all our tech guy
Mhm.
Matt, who built this whole VFX system to handle communicating, especially since it's a multiplayer game and it's like the code is different, and yeah, it's got to be different per person, whatever. It's like I don't know how to tell an effect not to look a certain way on one person's computer and look at it look a different way on another one. Like
Yeah.
I'm not a programmer, so it's like I don't do anything like that.
So that's where we differ, where you're mostly focused on the visuals, and I do like a lot of the implementation and like trying to figure
Yeah,
out like how does this affect in this like this situation and this and this and this. We've had situations where we were like, oh one thing that we did later was like, oh, we needed to be different if it's an ally or an enemy, a little bit like Overwatch does it, or
right.
so that was the thing that we talked about, and I was like, okay, well, I need to switch that value. Other is like, oh, like a game designer wants to have control over the right radius, and I'm like, at first you're like, no, I want to control it myself, and then at some point they just like go
That's
for
me every time.
400,
I'm like, nope.
and they're like 400 to 600 to like 750, and then you're like, uh,
the the
uh
variable ranges.
yeah, and then you're like, and then at some point, but you're like, you have to do maths on like, oh, because maybe you never thought at first that you're like you wanted your ring texture that you put underground to be like completely in the 0 to 1 range, because if you want to scale it to 500, you want it to take 500 units. That's not something I did, so you have to do math because you're like, oh, it's UV space, it's like 0.85. So you
Right,
have to
right.
divide the range by this, and like I did some of the
And you have to have a
that.
baseline. You have to figure out what your baseline is. If it's going to scale, you have to figure out
Yep.
what your base value is. What is zero? It's like, and then you have to, or 0. 0.1 or 0.0001 or whatever you would start it at. It's like, what is that math wise, and how does that multiply with the scale of my ring versus the size of this emitter? Like,
Do,
and how
do
does
you
that go from
feel
one?
like I feel like I got better at math doing VFX, and that's something that like
I did too,
and like
yeah.
just doing shader.
I understand it a little
So
bit
kind
better.
of piggybacking into like the next question with like what are some good ways to push yourself? I think learning a little bit more about math is kind of helps. You'll do things like with you can sometimes figure out things when you learn about like dot products and cross products that you wouldn't do it. You understand how a Fresnel works, for example. Like if
Hmm.
you learn about like vertex normal time dot product with camera direction, you're gonna learn how Fresnel
No, no,
works.
no. For now, just make the object rounded. That's all
That
you
works
gotta
too.
know.
That's really that works
Just
too.
make sure it's round.
When I said dot and I took yes, that's a dot. I was like, is it a cross product? What would it do if I would do vertex normal cross camera direction? I think it gives something weird, and you can sometimes figure out stuff with that, and just doing.
Oh yeah, you can mess around crazy with like shaders and stuff. You can just be like, what would happen if I multiplied these together and divided it and then added something else? Like, how would that look? And that's how you get cool stuff sometimes. Like,
My kind of like go to um acquiring new skill was because I was doing indie and there was a good amount of VFX, but maybe not enough for a full task. I would always learn, and I wouldn't learn VFX related stuff. I learned a lot of tech art. I learned how to profile a game. So sometimes it's just like it's not actually you won't get purely better in like VFX. It's sometimes it's you can catch other art skills like or other
oh
like
yeah,
stuff from other jobs that can work. I think for your project, I think that's gonna be different because they look more VFX heavy. Have you gotten like any? Have you done like lighting in any projects or things like that in order to pick up some other skills, or was it mostly just
no, I've never done lighting because both of the projects I've worked on we pre-bake everything, so it's like I don't know, I haven't really touched the lighting. It's more of our level layout guy. He takes care of everything, and then I tried at first to like throw some real lights and stuff, but it's like it just wasn't worth the cost performance wise. When we're already baking everything, it's like, why I don't need it to light up the whole scene, so I'll just throw a decal on the ground. If it needs to look bright, it's like I don't need it to light up the characters. It's fine. And our characters have different lighting anyway. It's like they're going to be affected differently than the environment because they have different lights on them versus what's on the environment to brighten them up. So it's like, yeah, I don't mess with lighting. I don't use it in VFX often. I will on like portfolio. Like I don't know, I have
oh
like a
yeah.
gun shot where I have a flash that like shows on the character, but I probably wouldn't do that in real game. It's just that's another difference between like portfolio and real games. It's like you can juice up your stuff, but you might not be doing all
I've
the
seen
same
people
stuff.
in tutorial do like, oh, every one of these particle will have a light attached to them, and I'm like,
Oh
no,
no, you would never do that.
never. I would no.
I've
Spawning
done that too.
spawn rate
We
on a
all
light
start messing
component.
around. Yeah.
You don't want to do spawn rate on a light component? That feels like a
Yeah.
really terrible idea, but I've seen it in portfolio, and every time it's just like this. Never. Like I would never do that. But if it looks cool in your portfolio,
Yeah.
the thing is,
Yeah, it might be worth it.
people will notice though. Like at some point.
Yeah,
I
they'll be like, that's unrealistic.
okay. But what are some new skill you did acquire? Because you can always like one skill that like one ways to push yourself is just do more VFX. You don't really have. I feel like it's healthy to not have like. I don't do as much VFX outside of work. I do look at like Twitter. I have like my bookmarks
Oh yeah,
and
my bookmarks is all
yeah,
VFX.
and that's one thing that keeps me on
That's my
Twitter.
reference.
Like literally one
Yeah.
of the only thing that keeps me on Twitter. Not getting
Yeah.
like talking about that platform in general, but just like I need my bookmarks. But there's a really cool Notion page from the guy at Tuatara VFX that they published recently. has a lot of these bookmarks, which is really nice.
Yeah, they're cool. I can't tell, like, do they just supply VFX work for hire
Yeah,
with all of their
exactly.
artists?
Yeah.
Okay. That's what I thought. I've thought about it. That's a good idea since VFX artists are so specialized to have a company like that. I don't know how many of those exist, but I
I think
I like that
there's,
for them.
I think Beyond Effects, Tuatara, I think there's another one that I'm missing, do this kind of work, and I think they're amazing. They also do a lot of like, um, well, not a lot, but they do a little bit of a like educational post sometimes. They're like, hey,
Yeah, I like that.
this is how we do our erosion, and that's stuff that you're like, well, like I'll be getting on a new project soon. You I'm pretty sure I'm gonna have to like I'm gonna review my shaders like definitely like I'm gonna have to review my shaders as like how did I do my erosion? Did I just do a subtract and a power? Did I do like a smooth step? Did I do like what
Yeah,
kind of
smooth step's the correct answer.
Yes, smooth
I
step
would.
is the correct answer, and that's what I did in my portfolio work. But that's not what I did on the C Ink. I did the subtract and the multiply, which is like really weird. And I was looking at
It
it
can be good though. I mean,
it worked for the project, but I barely did any erosion on. I actually did barely any erosion on deceiving. I did a lot of like soft fade and
yeah,
like
which
purely
works too. It's just all it just matters on the
yeah
style, really. I mean, we have a thing for Inkbound where we try not to do soft fades. We try to always do erosion. So
yeah. You
I
do like basically alpha like stepped alpha basically or like masked
yeah,
yeah
exactly. I just use noise and I step the noise and then I 0 to 1 lerp it
multiple yeah.
and I lerp it with the alpha, and that's it. I mean, I do that a lot on my channel, so people know how to do it if they've watched my stuff. But yeah, that's a big thing. And then I don't know about you, but I use a lot of well, I don't know if you can do this in Unreal, which is what you work in primarily, is using branches in your shaders, like true false, like booleans to be like toggles.
Oh, okay. Yeah, kind of. The thing is that they bring permission, like they kind of bring permutation cost up, and like, but it's not. It's like the least of your worries. I
Yeah,
did like do like, I think if we'd look at my like shader for deceiving, there'd be like, oh, do I use depth fade on this? Do I not? Do like things like that, which I think I've removed some of them right now. I think depth fade would just be on every time unless the project is like mobile or really like wants to target lower. Um, I
yeah.
think like computers are getting better and better, and unless you're targeting like Switch, then there's
Phones are too.
hmm? Yeah.
Phones are getting a lot
Oh
better
yeah,
too.
well iPhone 15 looks really interesting
Yeah.
in terms like I think it runs Resident Evil 8, which is like crazy. It
Oh, that's insane.
Yeah, and like unless you're working on the Switch, which is like really like
It's getting
yeah,
bad.
we've seen the
The
I
Mortal
feel bad,
Kombat.
yeah, the Mortal Kombat, and I feel bad for them because I don't think like they could do
Yeah.
much better.
I have a Switch, but I really just play either 2D games or just play Nintendo games on
Yeah,
it. I don't try to
but
do any
I'm
third
pretty
party.
sure I'm not gonna be canceled for that, but I'm pretty sure like Nintendo kind of like unlocks their Switch. I think that's been a thing where they use a little bit more of the
Oh,
power that they give developers. Um, but maybe
that
not.
would be
Maybe
interesting.
Tears of the Kingdom runs on like 2 GB of memory all the time, but I really doubt that. Um,
Yeah, yeah, I don't
uh,
know.
there's a thing
That is an
where,
interesting
but there is
thought.
the 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 like having that proprietary software too or hardware and knowing what's good on it and not and bad on it. Like so Sony
Yeah,
PlayStation type.
clearly the engine they use
Yeah,
is,
and Sony
specifically
PlayStation type.
targeting Switch.
And I think that's why like um maybe PC port of like Spider-Man games and things like that sometimes they're not the best or like Sony games because that they're made for the PlayStation and
Yeah.
like
Hmm.
either way like that's kind of out of the way but my so yeah for the like pushing myself. I've like barely pushed myself in terms of VFX. I've done more VFX. I've look at my colors. I've really tried to get better at colors because I used to really oversaturate a lot of my colors. So working with
Same.
someone else and being like, okay, this should be less saturated. I would really like to do like more pastel VFX, which like not too saturated and just like working more with my values. That's something that I kind of working. You
Yeah.
just work
Learning to not bloom everything. Not everything needs to bloom. Not everything needs to
just put it,
glow.
yeah, you can just put a the
It could
sprite
just be
behind.
a color.
Yeah, or just put the sprite behind it and fake your room. That does work
You could
too.
do that too. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, and then I've used to acquire more skill in areas where my team would be lacking a little bit. So I did do like
Right.
I did profiling a lot. I did stuff like that. And then you're not gonna be the best at it, but you're at least you're providing for your team. So I'm really like more a
Yeah.
generic dev than like I don't describe myself primarily as a VFX artist, but this is something that I really want to focus on my next job where like let's do VFX first and trust everyone to do their job and then help if there's anything like that I can provide
Yeah,
afterwards.
yeah. We have that too. It's like where if I'm working on an effect and it's very animation based, and the animation timing isn't great, it like doesn't suit the effect super well or whatever, I can say, "Hey, Mr. Animator, could you speed this up a little bit?" Or, cut out some frames, cut out some startup frames or whatever. It doesn't feel punchy enough with my effects. Like, it would
Hmm.
benefit my effects a lot if it was more punchy. I'm not going to go in and edit their animation, but I can point out that, it could be faster. But as far as implementation goes, I mean, just the other day, our animator reworked some animations and they weren't hooked up yet, so I went ahead and just hooked them up. And it's like just little stuff like that to help, because you don't have to wait a whole day for somebody else to
Yeah,
do it. Knowing how to do it is nice. I know how to hook up our animations, so it's like they're in here. I'll just hook them up, and so my effects can be ready and done. Like,
and
so yeah, helping out and learning implementation is very nice.
we talked about it a little bit uh before we started the interview because we were talking
Yeah.
before. Ooh, we did not just uh
Yeah, yeah.
but
We
yeah,
hop right on the call and start
yeah,
the
yeah,
interview.
exactly. Never talked to each other before. Just
Yeah,
hopped on a call and started interviewing. But we did talk about how with what happened with Unity and everything. I think there's a value to having knowledge that's like really knowledge agnostic, which like doesn't depend on like whether. So knowing your color theory, knowing how to use like a DCC program, so whether it's Houdini, Maya, Blender, whatever. I would recommend Blender because it's free. But I use
yeah.
Houdini.
I
Uh,
use my
which is completely fair too. But yeah,
my LT is cheap.
yep, it was. Does it still exist?
I don't know. I have a license now. I work for a company, so I just use their Maya license. But
So yeah, like working on your DCC, knowing Photoshop or Krita skills, just not being based on like I know I like Unity, I know Unreal. I'm a really really bad example of this. For me, I'm an Unreal dev. Core and core, I wouldn't take a Unity job. I wouldn't take a Godot job. I wouldn't take a I don't think I would take a proprietary engine job. Uh,
really,
at the moment, because I was
huh.
doing 3 years on Unreal. I really like the engine. But like having a set of knowledge that you can transfer to another engine is insanely useful. Because if half of the project that you have in your company switch from Unreal, from uh Unity to like Godot or like Unreal, well, you're cool. Or if like Game Maker does this weird engine revenue decision and you have to switch to someone else or
Yeah. Learn RPG Maker.
yeah, exactly. But just knowing like sometimes and these can be soft skills too. I think communication I've been a lot better at than I was at Ubisoft. Like, I'm still have a lot to work on. Being able to say like, I need this kind of event and whatever, like really helps a lot. And being able to say like, sometimes it's just saying like, or knowing yourself and being like, I am extremely burned out and I can't work. I think we have to scope this down. Like being able to track your time a lot and being able to be like, this is not gonna work or I can do like currently since I'm gonna end the job. I think it's like I have trying to figure out what's like what 2 week of work is. What can I bring? What can I do that can help them once I'm gone and like not and leave them in the best situation. I think that that's kind of like soft skills that are like appreciated. And then you'll
Yeah.
gonna because you're gonna get faster and better with time if you do VFX and if you care about like what you're doing, definitely. Um, so yeah.
A big thing between engines too is, most engines have the same stuff. It's just it's called something different. They use different terminology. Like, like I was talking to you earlier about how shader graph and master materials and Unreal
Yeah,
are
they're
basically
the
the same
same.
thing. You just they're the nodes are called something different or whatever. It's like, you gotta just figure out what's the equivalent when you move to a new engine, and if it even has it.
Yeah,
Most
and
engines have.
Unreal.
Like Godot, might not have everything that Unreal and Unity has, but there's probably something in there that's similar.
Yeah, I wouldn't say necessarily like learn HLSL or whatever. I think it's a
Ugh,
cool.
never.
I think it's a cool trick, but I think it's like it's less necessary. At least if you're styling out, that's not something. It's gonna take you a lot of time to do like really simple stuff. So I'm kind of started looking into shaders, but even then, it's like it's not really useful for me unless you're getting into like really specific either
Yeah.
Niagara scripts.
Sometimes you
And
have to, but other than that,
uh,
yeah.
Niagara is also
Like
HLSL, so that's uh, HLSL. Yeah, yeah,
HLSL. Yeah. I hate saying it. I always.
yeah. So that it's
Yeah,
fun. Um,
it's nice because you can convert shader graphs into code, and you can add something that isn't in. I've done that before, where you can, if with shader graph, you can convert it, and then you can do something in code that you can't do in the graph. Like I needed to turn the Z right off
oh, okay. Yeah,
completely,
yeah,
and you
yeah.
can't you
That
can't do that.
has been.
So I had to convert it and then kind of cap it off in
You
HLSL,
just complete filler.
and
It's not really
and then just
feasible.
add that one line, and then that's it, and it's
I
done.
was
But
trying to do like a half Lambert in Unreal, like for a while, and I just figured out it was way too complex, and I didn't. Like it's just because
yeah,
you don't have control over lighting in Unreal Shader, which I think you have in Unity, or at least you have with like
you can
URP or
do
sRG.
custom nodes. Like you can grab lighting information from custom nodes, and you can also grab baked lighting information, which is nice in Shader Graph. There's a baked global
Yeah,
illumination node, and that's really nice.
do
Shader Graph's a
skylight
nice thing.
direction also in Unreal, which is useful if you do unlit, but if you do like
Yeah.
PBR, then it's really tricky. But
Yeah, then
yeah,
you're just gonna have two separate lightings happening at the same time on your thing. Yeah, that's how cell shading works in Unity most
yeah.
of the time. Is you grab your light direction in your shader and possibly light color too, and
And you do your
do it
math.
that way.
You do your
Yeah, I like to.
dot normal light dot. I think that's light dot normal, and you get your
Yeah,
lighting.
normal vector light. I don't know what it is. I don't remember. I can see the string of nodes in my mind, but
Yeah,
yeah, I have my cell shading. I basically and you could do this. I basically just I took the one that was like my base, like here is a shadow, here is the normal color, this is just basic shell shading. But then I duped it a few times, and then I subtracted it out from each other, and I was able to add highlight and darker shadow and midtone. It's like you can get away with that with node based stuff. You can just be like, I'm just going to subtract this out from each other and mask it. And yeah, that's how my cell shading works. Is I just took the base one of having one color, duped it a few times, and now I have a highlight option. And I also like to subtract it out from each other so they're not overlaying. Like you want light to overlay sometimes, but for me, I need control over each color directly.
yeah.
I need my
So
highlight
you
to be
just
white
don't
and unaffected by anything, and
you
midtone
just
to be
don't
one
blend it.
thing. And
Yeah,
yeah, I don't blend
you'll
it.
find either way shaders. There's no one for shaders. I really like that there's no one solution.
Yeah,
You can
yeah.
do
Like that thing that's going around with the whole multiply versus subtract by one
yeah.
minus. Like, they
Just
they
do
look different,
yeah.
but they do a similar thing.
Are you? Do you consider yourself to be good at interviews? Like your job interviews? Is that something that you? 'Cause I was.
mm, I don't know. I can be. It depends on the day. I can be like charismatic and stuff, but I've had interviews where my brain was just fried. Like when I was between Studio Dry Dock and Shiny Shoe, which I was lucky to bridge the gap before I was jobless after my contract, but I I was interviewing a lot with a lot of different companies, and I did feel like I kind of bombed a few of those.
I
Like,
I think I bombed a single. Well, not really bomb actually. I had one bad interview. One thing we were talking earlier is I have said, and that's a bit of a weird way of phrasing it, but I do feel like some like jobs and there's a lot to be taken from like a job is one kind of relationship and it can be similar to other kinds of relationship and interviews to me are a little bit like dating. It's like you want to know a little bit about them, they want to know a little bit about you, and that's something I've said repeatedly. And you're like I don't think that the best practice for an interview is just to download Tinder, Inge, Bumble, whatever, and like start dating people. I don't think that's really efficient. But the more you do them, the more you're gonna get better at them, and you're gonna. It's a skill to be able to interview. I try not to talk too much in interviews. There's also this thing where I am my main language is French, and if the interview is in English, which has happened maybe once, I need to be careful because French Canadians swear a lot, and we like I have to. I've had meetings where I was reminded not to swear as much, and I realized afterwards that I was swearing a lot more than I should have. So that's sometimes tricky, just like vocabulary. I really prone to be really transparent. So if they ask me something and I don't know what to do, I don't I, I don't lie on interviews. I'll say like maybe there's like the small lies where it's like, oh well, because technically my contract at Ubisoft was they ended my contract, but it felt like I was being fired. So it's like, which one are you gonna say? You're gonna say that your contract ended at Ubisoft. Because during
Right.
COVID, it's really easy to sell that, and it's not a lie, but it's like I could say like yeah, it didn't work out, which is okay. Um,
Yeah, you don't have to say you got fired, you
no,
can just
definitely
say,
not.
I mean, they might contact the
They
company.
might,
If you really did get fired, they might contact the company and
that
find
wasn't
out.
like for but it was by the end of the contract, and it was like, yeah, well, now we want to go separate ways. It wasn't like I did something incredibly stupid or anything. So like that's not like I wasn't fired for cause or something.
Right. Yeah.
Like they still liked my work and anything. It just wasn't like a really good fit. Um, and you'll get that in interviews. You'll also get the art question. I talk about salary a lot, and like I like on first interviews, like I like if that's your if like recently in interviews that was like a point. It was like it was one of the points that was like numbers out of hours I want to spend is like really important. If they don't want to give you that information, it depends. I think it's not. I don't like it. It's not necessarily a red flag, but if they don't want to talk about salary, for me it's a little bit weird.
Yeah,
Uh,
and companies will want to use that as a, leverage point too. Like I've had interviews where I'm like, "Hey, what's your salary?" And they don't even give me a pay range. They ask me. They'll say,
yeah,
"Hey,
what do you
what do
expect to
you
be?
feel comfortable making?" So if that is the situation, that is fine, but aim high because I'll tell
Yes.
you, it
I
works.
was for the job. I am lucky with the interview and the job that I'm gonna get is that I did give a number that was lower that would a little bit lower than the market rate was because I was doing indie
Mhm.
work and I was like a little bit on the lesser range and I had to get like I would like really go up. I knew like I'd go up a lot because uh like companies was in Montreal and so like higher cost of life and everything. Rent is higher. Uh, but they gave me more than what I was that I asked, and that was really nice of them and like really cool. But yeah, like I give a range. I never give an exact amount,
Give a
and I
range,
ask
yes.
and I ask for and I asked for a range. I'm like, what's the and you usually get response like generally they'll be like either they're like well what's your range that you're thinking about, and I don't really like the question but I understand why it's there, and you kind of have to know a little bit, you have to do a little bit of research. uh um so sometimes it's like uh which is the hard thing of normalizing talking about salaries. I
Yeah.
would recommend people to look up. I think at some point there was the Blizzard Excel sheet that existed. That's a good reference point sometimes. People do post their salaries sometimes, and they're like, "Hey, I was making this at this company, and then I made this," uh, and it's useful to know that you're not being screwed over um, or kind of knowing your value. Um, which is we're not
Yeah,
like
you got to know your value for sure.
we're
And giving
it's
giving a range, you might get the high end,
yeah, you
if they
might
really
get the
like you.
high end. You might get the lower hand too, and that's the part where
Well,
you
that's why
kind of
you,
want.
you give a range where you can accept too.
But
It's like make your low, higher than what you're making now for sure, and then or whatever you're comfortable with, make that your low,
uh,
I guess.
and
If you can put money back and afford your bills, make that your low. and
Yep.
then
It,
add 10K or something to your height
yeah,
range. And
yeah. The range I was giving was I think for us was like I think I gave like 55 to 65K for Quebec. It
yeah,
felt okay. I think for you rent is higher, so it's gonna be much higher.
yeah,
I think
yeah, it is higher,
I've
but
seen people do like I've seen people work in VFX and do 120K and more. Like that's not this is like in California and things where cost of life is really high or whatever. If I was a VFX artist in New York, I would be asking for like nearly 100K, I think, because like
yeah,
rent is insane. I wouldn't know why you'd like. No offense to anyone, but I wouldn't base a VFX studio or like a game studio in New York because it's really, really expensive.
yeah,
Or in the middle of New York, let's say. Um,
yeah.
Unless you're doing like full remote is fine. But offices is tricky. Offices are tricky and things and like everything. I'm happy not to be in that part of the. Uh, but yeah, successful interview is like do eventually you'll get good. But one thing that we did,
Don't be a robot either.
yeah,
In your interviews, you gotta be yourself. It's gonna be nerve wracking, especially your first few. Just try to be comfortable. Try to. It's a personality match too, and they're gonna
yeah,
want to get a read on your personality with the rest of the team. So if you're a stuck-up prude, and you come off like that in your interview, it's like, yeah, they
yeah,
might, even if your skills are good, they might value you less because you're not a cool guy.
be
So
respectful,
just
be nice,
yeah,
ask question that ask question at the end of interviews. They're really important. They really tell a lot about that you're caring for the job, and depending on the question, it gives them a good read on either your personality or what you care about. It's a little bit how you are with friends. I think there's a really good value in like kind of figuring out what bothers your friend because it gives them like if your friend's really bothered when if you're late, well, you know that punctuality is one of their like probably one of their good values. Or if they do care a lot about not being late, well, you kind of will figure out that maybe if you're late, they might get a little bit more angry. And that's a little bit like the same thing with the like what you asked. Well, like I've asked in interviews and that's like a weird question it's maybe a weirder question coming from a guy, but like coming from like uh girls or non-binary people, there's really the interest in what's the gender split in the company, and I was really
yeah,
happy with the like it gives an idea of what the diversity in the company is. Is that something that's valuable to you? It's really nice. I was really happy with the response. It was really cool. um and I think it gives them like they did. I think they did was also enjoy that I was asking the question, show that I like the diversity and
yeah, and you care about inclusivity and
yeah,
diversity. Yeah,
like are
it's
they
it's good.
there's like really cool stuff that came out of like interviews that I asked a lot of questions. There's also really like there's not like like um I've asked companies and I'm don't really want to say name, but I've like there's like currently Embracer is a big point of contention in the game industry, and I've asked companies that were owned by Embracer if like they were really secure with like layoffs and things, and they didn't
Mm.
like I don't think they had that information, and for me that was like a no go. I didn't want to go and be like, oh, I don't want the project to be canceled, and like yeah. So
Yeah,
that could
that's a good question to ask. Is does the company have a history of layoffs or
what's
mass layoffs?
yeah
Like,
that can be a question. It can
it's
put
a harsh one, but
it can put them off.
it's important.
But that was like a really hard question that I had to ask in an interview. I don't know if I lost point for that. I do, but
Yeah,
in the end, like for me, it wasn't working either way. And timing was weird because I had the other offer at the same time. But yeah, like it's like be careful with the question, but be open about like and be open that they might not answer every single one of your question. Uh, Things like questions that were really important to me for me is that I wanted to stay in Quebec City. Was like return to office. Was this a thing? Like sometimes they were like, oh, we have meetings in person, and I was like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean
yeah,
meetings in person? How often they are? Is that like, is the VFX team mostly stay at home? Is that whatever? Sometimes there's like, what's the politic for
yeah.
return to office? Is this flex?
Definitely clarify that
Is this
ahead of
monthly?
time.
What is remote? for you, are you shipping me a
Yeah.
computer? Because I'm not tweaking VFX start timing through Citrix or remote desktop or whatever. I will die. I've done this
Yeah, of
before,
course.
and I was basically doing pre-render. I was rendering the VFX, like I was doing OBS, rendering the, and then sending it to my other computer to check the timings like in
Ooh.
real time, and then tweaking
Yeah,
that. That was
that's rough.
terrible. Not doing that again. Like at the really beginning of COVID, I was doing that, and I like wasn't fun. So there's a lot of questions that you can ask, but one thing that I do consider that that's important is that I think there's you can really gauge where you are, and we talked about this a little bit, and you will like keep this knowledge for the interview, but you can gauge where you are in terms of skills depending on what you get for answer. I think there's a really hard part where when your portfolio is really not good enough, where you're basically rarely gonna get an answer from HR because they're not really gonna consider you, and that's a really harsh place to be, especially if you like finish college and things, and you think you're ready, and people are we're often a little bit too nice. I think with feedback, there's a weird place where someone will have put a lot of time into an effects or like into a portfolio. It doesn't really have to be VFX related. It can be like can be anything, but like it mostly art stuff. Like they just finished their college. They just finished like their bachelor or whatever. They have this project. They're really proud of it, but it's not at the level that's hireable yet, and you kind of don't want to be the person to tell them. And that often that maybe you're gonna send it to HR and you're gonna go on a pile and you're not really like you kind of go in the trash directly and they might
Yeah,
not
if you
interview.
can't figure out why you're not actually even getting into interviews, that could definitely be it.
Yeah, that
And
that
they're
can
they're
be it.
probably too nice to say. They'll just say, we've reviewed your application, we're going to go with somebody else at this time, and you didn't even get an interview. It's probably because your
Well,
portfolio is not
that
looking so
even
sharp.
just getting that answer to me tells that you are closer to a hireable level
Oh yeah,
because they respect
yeah,
that at some point you might be at that level, so they do kind of want to give them they not kind of completely closing the door on you. So when you start getting answer, if you get absolutely no answer and you get nothing, not even a rejection letter, you I would work more on my portfolio. If you start getting uh like rejection letters, I would ask if there's anything that you like. Sometimes they will be willing to give you a little bit of feedback. I know if
yeah.
I
I've done that, and it was good feedback.
yeah, I would
So
uh for art test I've asked for feedback. I finally did get the job because of the art test, so I was like, well, I don't really need the feedback. Well, I will take the feedback, but I'll be able to talk with them in like 3 weeks. So like I will ask them either way. But that's was fun to be like,
yeah, I won't spoil who, but I there was a company who I talked to, and they uh, they weren't so sure off the rip, and they rejected me. And then a few weeks later, I got a message that was like, "Hey, we messed up. We want you to do an art test."
that's
Because
fun. That's actually I'm not a big fan of art test in general, but I think you'll have
I
to
mean,
do them.
mine was paid though. Paid art tests are important.
Yeah,
I think you should get paid for your work,
you should try.
regardless of
I think
anything.
if it really depends what you're looking for. If you like, it's hard to ask for a paid art test when you don't
Yeah,
have.
if it's not offered, you're probably not gonna get it.
Yeah,
I probably wouldn't ask if
I
it's not
did free art test,
like
but it was
clear.
like I like that they show respect for your time. To me
Yeah,
is more important than necessarily
yeah.
being paid. Like my
Turn
last
it into portfolio work too. When
that
you're done
that's
with the
nice
art test,
too.
tweak it, turn it into portfolio work.
If
Don't waste your time.
if you can if you can have like you can do like some stuff where it's like hey can I at least keep it from my portfolio. Is this part too specific to like maybe the game you're having, maybe not at this, can I have this part because it's like a more generic effect. I think these are things that you can ask for. I think they help. But yeah, I do not like unpaid art tests, but it's still a practice that you're gonna have to go through probably. So like that's a thing. When you start getting interviews, for me, is the point where you're like when you start getting into interviews, you know your portfolio is kind of good. You know you're getting
Yeah,
to that
definitely.
level. And then eventually you'll get like making friends in the VFX industry is also really useful because I've not applied for my new job. I've got recommended to a friend that got like headhunted. and he was like, well, this person might do the job for you. He's good. Like,
Yeah.
and I'm like,
Once you notice people start following you who are like leads on teams or
that's fun
directors,
too.
and it's like, okay, maybe they see me,
Have you
maybe I'll
had
get
the?
headhunted.
I've had like the like Clement Lazar and like I can't know names, but I really like Clement Lazar. Uh, I might be butchering his name, but like I really like his. And a lot of the guys at Tuatara are really, really good, and I really enjoy it. Like you see them and you're like, oh my god, or like
Yeah.
Sarayan from Riot that used to do a lot of Unity tutorials too. That was really
Yeah.
cool. Chris Sayers also that I think you're gonna interview too. Like you're like
Yeah.
those are big names. Like for us, those are big names, and
Yeah,
it's kind of
those are
like
good guys. They're big names. They're talented. Like, yeah, it's a big thing. I'm excited to talk to
yeah.
Chris. And getting familiar with names and stuff is nice, and being able to create, or, you join the community, like get involved, follow people, engage with them, like on their effects and stuff,
Andrea's
and
glad
being able
also
to
if you're
like.
doing the
There's so many people on, VFX Apprentice as well. I am like just as I was getting deeper into learning a few years ago, I joined VFX
hmm
Apprentice just because I knew I could make connections there. And now you've got people like, Ben and Jason
Jason is
Kaiser.
amazing.
Like Jason's great, but he's so like there are people that are lower level,
Yeah,
that you
there are
can
more
like relate to.
Keys,
You
maybe
can't connect with Jason as much.
Smear Keys, really cool. I think you
Simon, to whatever.
yeah
He just
yeah
gave a
yeah
talk
yeah
recently.
Simon
He has a strange last name. It starts with a T.
The Rhyme VFX talk, the waterfall talks. Yeah,
Yes, yes.
that's a really
Simon. He's also in VFX Apprentice. I believe I don't know. It's so
a lot
they
of people.
add like instructors all the
A
time.
lot
So
of
I
people
don't.
just do VFX Apprentice because it's a
Yeah.
really, really cool. I think right now they're on a subscription. I think you can still access the Discord if you paid for a course, but the subscription that might have changed. 'Cause
Yeah.
I
I'm
was
still in. I only paid for a course, so.
yeah, yeah, same. But I don't have the access anymore because it was through job. But I might just pay for a course with like join. It's really
Yeah.
fun.
It's nice to be a
Real-time
part of the
VFX
community.
too. Real-time VFX community on Discord is really really cool.
Yeah, I need to join that one.
There are others.
I need to make a community for this channel too, for
Yeah,
like new people, and some people that have been in the industry to talk,
I would really like
because
to do more
opening the door.
breakdown too.
Yeah, yeah. I want to do VFX breakdowns, and another thing I want to do on this channel is taking effects from games and breaking them
Yeah.
down and showing you how to do that effect,
How would you,
or
yeah,
like,
how would you do it? And they
yeah, how I would
probably
do it.
haven't done like they might have not done it this way.
Yeah,
And
I just played Dredge. It's a pretty short game, but I beat Dredge recently, and it's nice simple effects, but they look really good, and you can just you a big thing about VFX is looking at something and knowing how they did
yeah,
it, and being able to deconstruct that visually. So I think it would be a useful exercise to make some videos on taking some effects from other games and breaking them down and making them in front of you so you can see like
mhm.
what it is that makes this,
I
and then
yeah.
you can apply that information.
And yeah, I think successful interview, I think have fun too. I think that's like really not
Yeah.
talk about, but I really like I am messing around in interview. Like I'm being really myself really. I'm someone
Oh
who
yeah.
I believe is kind of polarizing. I think some people will not like me and some people will like me, which is completely
Yeah.
okay. And like I will not like some interviews I've not fit that well. I've had an interview where like the interviewer was like kind of missing and I was just like in a one-on-one with like a tech artist without a webcam. That was really weird. I really didn't like
Yeah,
that.
that's strange.
That didn't have like didn't get an answer and I wasn't like, expecting an answer. I was looking for work, but I don't think it would have fit really well. Um but yeah, I kind of started enjoying like I somewhat enjoyed the interview process. I think it's nice. You'll meet new people that are cool. Get ref if you have uh I think knowing people is also super valuable even if they're not it like if they're in your college course or if they're from Twitter, Blue Sky, whatever we're gonna be using in a year, is
Yeah.
um like or Discord is really cool because your first day, if you know at least one person, is much less stressful than if you know nobody. Like that's like
Yeah.
a complete like it's a completely different uh like experience. I knew people when I was getting into Ubisoft. I knew like one or two people. It just starts your conversation. You might have someone to like dine with at first if you're working in the office, or play with after hour, or play with during like dinner time. Like it's really nice. It helps a lot. Um, like be nice to people in the end. Like it's not really like
Yeah,
soft
yeah,
skills is half of it, or like a little bit less than half of it, depending on how you work. Um, and like
yeah.
red
A
flags.
few
The interview red.
key things before we jump into red flags
Yeah.
on interviews. I want to backstep just a little bit and talk about, because we're talking about talking to people and connecting and all that. So as far as knowing artists goes, if you are seeking feedback from other people on your portfolio or anything like that, because that's a nice part about knowing other VFX artists is, they can give feedback. Don't push it on people. That can get annoying. It's like if I'm messaging Chris Sayers every day and being like, "What do you think? What do you think? What do you think?" Occasionally, like, you can send somebody something and be like, "Hey, what do you think about this?" Or comment on a thread or whatever. Or if you post and you can say, "Hey, looking for feedback." But one important thing to understand is that it's all subjective.
Hmm.
And your art director at the end of the day is the one that decides, or your boss or whoever is the one that decides how it looks. And if so, it's like the random Twitter user is not necessarily on the same page as like if you had an
Hmm.
employer and they're the ones deciding this stuff. So it's like I think feedback is valuable when it's stuff like, you have no timing, there's no intro or
Yeah.
outro
Yeah.
to your particles, they're popping in, it's like you can point out that stuff.
Technical
But if
flaws,
you're
things
getting the
like that. Yeah.
feedback that's like, hey, this should be more blue, you should erode this instead of fade this, like, that stuff doesn't really matter that much. It's all subjective. So if you're looking for feedback, do not take it all to heart, because it's each artist would do it differently, and
Technical
that's
feedback
another
and
thing about.
how to's
Yeah,
are somewhat valuable. It's like, hey, I've seen your effects. You did this. How did you manage that? I'm trying to do something
yeah,
different.
yeah.
Like,
Ask questions.
yeah, that
Yeah,
like people will answer. They not
yeah.
everyone is always.
I answer.
I would answer too. You can find like if you could like maybe you could link in my Twitter or whatever, and I'm really open
Yeah,
to
yeah.
feedback. Both of us together will have a lot covered from like Unity to
Yeah,
Unreal. So we'll
that's
get the
true.
both
Yeah.
big engines. And yeah, it's special. I do have a little bit of a weird way of getting feedback, or like uh managing feedback, which I kind of go with like what I call like a two strike system. And I think like if I don't personally like something, I kind of like put a strike on it. And if someone else tells me like like, oh, I don't really like this, I I put another strike. And at that point, I'm kind of gonna start thinking about how I would redo it, and that's where I kind of move. And anyone kind of can give me a strike. It really doesn't like whoever is doesn't really matter. Some people kind of get the instant like two strikes if they say,
Right.
and maybe in some bigger production you go from two strike to three strikes because it doesn't make sense because you're too much and like or people are really willing to give a lot of feedback. Maybe it's not valid to just have two people tell you that something is a little bit off or like, oh, your timing's a little bit off. You
Yeah.
talked
Yeah.
about like
It's just like QA testing. If you're
you know,
if you're hearing one person giving that feedback, it doesn't matter as much. If you're hearing 20 people give it,
yeah,
it's something that matters.
I
So
really don't like this, and I think yeah, that's it's all valid feedback, and it just listen to feedback. Don't be too learn to kill your babies. Like sometimes something
yeah,
just does not work,
yeah.
and it does happen. And I've worked on like muzzle flashes for like 2 weeks trying to figure out something that would work, getting like really good textures and like work.
They're tougher than you think.
They're really hard. To me, they're really. It's like it's your lifetime's gonna be like 0.12 seconds, maybe max 0.8. They're gonna last like maybe two or
Yeah, it's got
like
to be quick. So
maybe
there's no
six
time for
frame.
intro, outro. Like, yeah, there's hardly any time to erode it. You're gonna see the erosion happen over 2 frames or
Yeah,
something.
so it's
Like,
and sometimes
it's
I've
hard.
had like, oh, you need to throw an arrow, and if you're running at less than 30 FPS, the arrow's already like really far, so you won't see it. So what you do, you spawn a little arrow that does not move just in front, and that lasts like a frame, or that lasts like real long. So you're just gonna see it like for 1 frame at up with a little bit of velocity, and then but the actual projectile is much farther at that time. So I've done this before like you can fake stuff a lot, but
Oh, that's all we do is fake stuff.
Yeah,
It's all smoke and mirrors,
nothing's
which is
real.
why the process doesn't matter as much.
Yeah,
With VFX, things can be accomplished in so many different ways. Like if I have two tones of color in a particle, if say it's just a hard edged round particle and I want two separate colors, there's a million ways to do that. you
yeah,
can you can literally have two separate particles and order them on top of each other, layer them. You can have two textures together and subtract it out and add it back together.
yeah,
You could even, if it was just a circle, you could have a sphere with a hard edged Fresnel on it and it would look the exact
yeah,
same and you wouldn't be able to tell. Like
yeah.
there's a lot of
It's
different ways,
really
and
like,
knowing the ways is important.
yeah, and I think we I don't know how much you do this, but even when I'm a solo VFX, I really value having people that I can like, even under NDA, just being like, hey, you did some cool water effects, and I like something that's really generic and that's gonna be like in every game that doesn't tell like, hey, I'm doing like let's say I'm doing like this special ability that's really specific and that's like a really marketing ploy and like whatever. Maybe don't
Yeah,
talk
I'm
about
working
that.
on this licensed thing, and here's
Yeah, you
this
know this
character.
Marvel Spider-Man thing,
Yeah.
like
How
red
would you
shooter.
do a Spider-Man web?
Yeah, yeah. So maybe not that, but like having people that you're like, hey, I'm I'm struggling with this a little bit. How would you like approach it? I think that's super valuable. Like, even like under NDA, you're still careful. You respect your NDAs or whatever. Um, and same thing for like if inside the studio, you mentioned like having an animator tweak timing. I have animator tweak my curves sometimes. Like I
Yeah, it can
it's just
help.
been like how can like that's been one feedback I had at UB that I still remember. If you're doing like maybe a bird's VFX or something like that, maybe you're not the best person to do the bird model. You're probably gonna be the good person to remesh it and have it at a good amount of particles that it amount of uh vertices that it's not gonna like tank the frame rate, or maybe that's a tech artist job, depends. Just everyone has strength, believe in their strength. I have an art director slash UI artist that's really good at like telling me that my colors are wrong, and it's like, hey, at this person on Discord, Slack, whatever, what do you think about my colors? I had VFX like lead or like just like VFX fellow VFX artists that were harder to understand their feedbacks, and I was like, and my way of doing that, which is not the healthiest way in terms of like feeling good about yourself, was like, what do you
Right.
not like about this? And then they'd be like, well, I don't really like this ring. I don't think it belongs. And that sometimes is really, really valuable because you kind of learn what they like through, because they're not really going to tell you exactly what they like. But if you know what they don't like, at some point you're going to figure out the art direction they're willing to go to and things like that. So there's a lot of ways to getting like feedback, and it's tricky. It's always tricky and getting through. And there's tutorials on YouTube for a lot of stuff. It's still valid. I think I still watch tutorials for some stuff.
Same.
Uh,
Yeah.
it's not as often. Definitely, sometimes it's for new tech. That's uh
Yeah.
valid. That's valuable sometimes. Uh, like uh, I was I was recently playing with Unreal 5, and there was stuff that was like a little bit different from Unreal 4, and I was like, does this still exist? And it's like no, and you're like, okay, how do I do it instead? You're kind of you're gonna be. It's a big problem solving job too, which is really fun to me. Uh,
Can be,
yeah.
yeah, until it gets stressful. Until the time starts ticking and then you're like, okay, I really got to figure out how to do this.
If you wanna, going back to the interview slash red flags and interview question. Do you have like red flags for interviews? The,
Um, red flags on interviews. I wouldn't say the whole avoiding the salary question is like necessarily a red flag because that's what HR is told to do. It's like they want more leverage, they want salary ranges, they'll probably never tell you their max budget for
no,
for your
it's a little bit
role.
higher
So
than what they're gonna give you
yeah,
probably.
yeah, I wouldn't say it's a red flag necessarily. One thing that I will say is you should always ask about the company culture and make sure that's a good match for you. If the company, and sure, they might lie and be like, "Oh, we're super casual around here," and then, you get fired for like saying a bad word
Uh,
or something like,
I had
but
I had people
ask
say
about the culture.
I had people swear in interviews, and for me that was a
Oh
green
yeah,
flag.
I love it.
Well, that was a green flag.
We
That
say
was
a
like,
lot of bad words.
yeah,
Chinese shoe, we're all saying bad words.
that's fun. And sometimes, but there's not all studios that are like really serious. I think culture is really
Yeah.
important. I've had
Get a good read, ask about the culture, if your interviewer, are they just HR or are they a part of the team too? For smaller teams, that's, they might be the CEO interviewing you.
yeah,
Like, you never know.
I've had
Or just other
people.
people on the art team.
Sometimes it's just like fun common interests. I had someone like in interview like an HR rep having like a Naruto display of that Jiraiya, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh, I could talk to him about like anime
Yeah, you're
probably.
like, haha,
And you just
here's
don't
my
have time.
in.
You don't have time during the interview, but at some point you're like, hey, are you like an anime fan or whatever? You can talk to people, and it kind of gives you if he has that like if they have that or if he has that like in his room and it's shown through his webcam, well, it's probably shown during like job meeting, and I don't believe like people are gonna like intimidate him because he's a weeb or whatever. So that's like a like
Yeah.
good like small stuff. What kind of games they play, what kind of games they make is also
Yeah.
like interesting. And
Yeah, get some casual conversation and ask some stuff. That'll give you a good read. Yeah, ask what they're into, ask what kind of games they like. I've done that a lot. Talk to people about that.
no.
For if you and me were interviewing, I would say, "Oh, so you're an Arctis 7 headset fan like myself."
I actually do not like it that much because it broke the glass on me. I had another one just left here, just completely like stopped working. And
Taking these things off is really difficult. These pads, getting
oh,
them back on is horrible. If you so there's a reset button on the inside of here, underneath one of these pads,
oh
and
really?
I've had to take it off before to get to that reset button,
Oh,
and
I didn't know that was a
it's
thing.
horrible to get back on.
But yeah, I
It's
really
like a very thin ridge.
yeah.
You have to get it on.
But you'll have things in common with nearly every single people that you're gonna like meet in like they're all uh they're most of them are gamers, most of them play games, most of them like Studio Ghibli. A lot of them, if you talk about Studio Ghibli, they're gonna
Right.
know you
Everybody.
do.
Yeah.
There's that like
Yeah.
that's some of the things that we talk. Tattoos sometimes are a thing that's gonna be talked about. The style,
Right.
uh, like that's basically how we started talking to like I asked about his tattoos. Told him
Yeah.
like I
Yeah.
had
Just
just gotten my first one, and you'll meet people, you'll have fun. So I think there's a lot of green flag that you can have in interviews. You'll kind of know if an interview's not going well. I don't think I usually do know if I'm gonna get like a response or not. I think it's harder when you're styling out. Uh, you can ask if there's anything. I think same thing with dating. Sometimes it doesn't work. It's like, hey, what's the issue? If you said like if you said a slur or something or you swore, they might not tell you. Like
yeah.
if you
Don't
said
say any
something really
slurs.
bad, like yeah, don't slur. Very
They'll
good.
just hit the hang up button.
But yeah,
But yeah, keep it comfortable, keep it cash money, casual, just be yourself. Don't
yeah.
don't overthink it.
Tell them
Answer the
tell them
questions to the best
they're
of your ability.
your little pog champ and no, don't. But yeah, just be normal or somewhat normal, and usually it goes well. Do I have other red flags? I have Googled for company drama, just like name of the company, drama, news. You
That's a
kind of
good thing to
look,
do.
you some place you'll get it, some place you won't. Uh, um, there's been
Yeah, I don't have any like huge red flags. I was just curious if you did, that's why I included the question.
no,
But
but
the big thing is, yeah, getting a read on the interview, seeing how it's going. If it's going really weird and stiff, maybe try to lighten it up. I don't know. And
yeah.
that's the biggest thing. Just be yourself. Keep it loose. Keep it casual. You're gonna be nerve wracked for your first interview. That's just how it goes. And
Oh,
you'll get more comfortable. And
obviously, it's
do not let your heart shatter into pieces when you get a rejection because it will happen. Just use it
try
as
to, yeah,
ammunition.
try to use it as a jumping pad for whatever else you
Yeah,
can
yeah.
get.
It's your motivator to get better. And you know I guess we can. There's a few key points I want to talk about before we sign off. We've been talking for a while, but like as far as how you can improve if you do get that rejection, what you can do. You can ask, of course, but a big thing you can do is obviously juice your portfolio and learn new skills, because if your portfolio is not juiced enough, you're probably missing something that you don't know yet. And look at other people's portfolios, watch tutorials, but the thing about tutorials is do not copy paste that work into your portfolio. Everybody knows it, they can see it. You're not going to get
Mhm.
anywhere with that.
Mix
What
and
you
match
do from
elements. At
tutorials,
least mix
yeah,
and
you can
match,
mix and match.
because that's something that you're probably gonna do as a junior a lot. Depending if you're at least at Triple Eight Studio, I was reusing a lot. I was barely doing any texture. It was just like, hey, let's take this from this effect and this from this
Yeah,
effect, and
I
then
use a whole lot of noise, and,
yeah.
and that's about it.
Oh, use
But
free asset packs are also completely fine. Either to
yeah,
look
yeah,
at them and
change
like
it up though.
content starter for Unreal. But I use free noise a lot. I think Luos
Hmm.
has had some free noise for like a while. I use these. There's a lot of stuff that you can use that you don't have to make from scratch every time. Uh, I,
Yeah,
I think.
take these. So if you need to learn something, say you don't know how to do a dissolve or an erode or whatever you want to call it, just look up something that would have it there in the tutorial, like, and see how they do it.
Mhm.
Don't If you're looking at like I don't know, smoke, smoky roads most of the time. So if you were looking at a smoke thing tutorial, you wouldn't just copy paste the whole thing. Grab the information you need to learn, or hold on to the information you're learning as you're watching something, and think about all the different applicable ways you can use that tech that you just learned.
Mhm.
Like, once you learn about custom vertex streams and stuff, think about all the million different things you can do with that, because you can. It's a
Yes.
0 to 1 value. You can do whatever you want with that. Like, there's a ton you can do in shaders with that information, but never copy paste from a tutorial, and don't do them from my tutorial either. I give my assets on Patreon. I have my source, the project is just available. All the stuff's in there, and I don't care if people use it in their projects, but don't like resell it or anything
Yeah, that's
like
it. Yeah.
that. Yeah, don't just do that. But I think that's fairly common knowledge. Just gain knowledge from it. Don't gain a new portfolio piece from it.
Yeah. It, I think I also am really uh I like to warn. Well, it's I used to work with kids, and a lot of them would be like, oh, or parents would be like, oh, so he's gonna make a career out of this, so no, 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 no. And I am pretty like, it's it sounds like a really, really cool career, but there's hardship to it. I think our industry currently is like in a weird place where employment, like, there's a lot more layoffs. Currently, there's a lot of uncertainty. Hopefully, it's gonna go away soon. I think we're lucky in VFX that it's a specialized role and there's a little bit less uncertainty and there's still people recruiting for that role. Um, but like if you're like there's still a little bit of stress and like it's hard and the level to it is getting higher and higher every time. I'm seeing junior portfolios that are like much better than what I had. It depends where you are. It depends what schooling's available. What and with VFX Apprentice and like other this becomes more and more like available and easier to get, so people are getting better. And like I'm seeing really 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 cool portfolios. Um, so like
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
just to like kind of go back and be like, do I really want to do this? Because it can be hard, but like when you decide to do it and when you if it's for you, it's really fun. I think it's really there's also like you're gonna see the angry gamer message. I've had one, well, not death threats, but I had like players on Discord tell me to kill myself or things like that, or like I've had there are the bad parts of the job, and you they're not always there, but they happen like every other job.
Right. Yeah, you got to get a kind of a thick skin. Don't take feedback on your game to heart. If a player's giving negative feedback on your game, that means they had the expectation that it was something else, and they're jaded over it and
Yeah.
whatever. Like, that's not your fault. That's it's a whole list of reasons why you know I don't know, it's the design of the game, the balance of the game. Like, if people are mad, don't let it get under your skin. Just make your art. Make your art that you
Yeah.
like and be happy with it.
That's what
Don't
I
get
want to
too in the
do
weeds.
next, actually. That's why that's one of the things that what I really want to specialize in VFX, and I want to be somewhat relevant. And you can get there. Just it needs to you need to. There's a little bit of work to be done, actually. Like maybe just um, I think it's like if you're a student expecting that you're just gonna do your course and doing the bare minimum and get a job afterwards, I don't think that's a good mentality. I think you really
No.
it's hard because some teachers are not gonna tell you that you're not good enough. And I will
Hmm.
probably and if I come to your portfolio day and I tell you this after you've done your whole thing, it's gonna be harsh, so I usually don't. But there's there's way you can say it that it's like, and people are getting better, I think, to telling people that that's not good enough, in a
Yeah, I
nice
see
way.
it a lot on Twitter, man. People will share something and they're like, new portfolio, or like, this was my art test, or I'm going into an interview, and then you look at their stuff and you're like, oh man, I wish you would take a little extra time because it's not easy. I'll tell you right now, like, it's easy in a sense, but you have to know what you're doing.
Yep.
Like, you cannot go in once you know what you're doing, things are easy, but you can't go in with half the knowledge you need and half the portfolio power that you need. Like, I would say get 5 or 6 really strong pieces on your portfolio, and that's all you need.
Yep.
Like, they have to be strong. They got to be like I
And
forgot to mention the whole looping effects thing we were talking
oh
about.
yeah, yeah, you
Don't
do.
post 5 different orb effect loops. Like, you need to diversify your portfolio and show a melee attack effect. It depends on the games you're trying to work on, of
Mhm.
course, but if you want to be broad and work on action games or whatever, most games are actiony, so it's like, do a melee attack effect, do a ranged effect, do a character effect like a buff, do a heal, do a pickup, like
Explosions are sometimes good.
explosions. Yeah, everybody does,
And then don't do the basic explosion that's like the mushroom explosion. Do something else. Like the magic
yeah,
explosion. There's
yeah,
really a,
magic, plasma,
I like
electricity. Like,
doing D&D spells sometimes. They
I've
could
thought about that too,
they could be fun. They're
because the
hard.
prompt is right there.
Yeah, the prop is right there. And there's a lot
You
of
can just read it
documentation on
and.
that, so you can start with
Mhm.
that. That's a good like, hey, what do I want to do? Let's start with VFX. I tried to do like color spray at something, but it's really like abstract, so it's like,
It's just like spray paint.
yeah, I don't know what I did, but it was weird. Because that's like a really abstract effect that's like confusing. So like there's stuff you can do definitely. Uh, but it's a fun job, and you get to meet cool people like
Yeah,
Brandon.
it's very fun. Yes, I am extremely cool. So you could meet me.
Yes. Uh,
All right, we've been talking forever. We should probably wrap up.
yeah.
This is longer than I expected, and I would like to include it all in the video. So, about the average length of one of my videos, honestly, is a little over an hour. My first one's super long because I'm going like piece
When
by piece of the particle system and being like, this is what you'll use, this is what you'll probably never use. Just
yeah, I run
this
this
is
as
what this
a
does.
we could have said it, but we like should have maybe you could have like run this as a podcast on the side. Hopefully you're doing some
Yeah.
particle work, or you've been doing some particle work or doing like,
This is second monitor content.
yes, this is second month content, which is
So
perfectly okay.
yeah. All right. So let's do an outro here. Let's give let's where do people find you? All that good stuff.
For the moment, you can find me on Twitter. Probably will move to Blue Sky eventually. That's at Brassard Etienne. That's it. Yeah. So at Brassard Etienne, you can find me. Uh,
I'll post your links and stuff in
yeah,
the
I
description
think
as
that's pretty
well.
much it. Honestly, I'm the most. My
ArtStation?
ArtStation is,
ArtStation?
ooh, if you look at Zinvasal, you're gonna find it, but really old. Mostly is used to say no to people from like Europe calling me for VFX work and not being interested in waking up at 5 a.m. That's
Or
most.
people messaging you and being like, "Listen, I got this project. It's got a lot of heart, but I don't have any money.
Yeah, that's the
You can,
thing.
I
Yeah.
can't pay you, but
So Twitter, Blue Sky eventually, but my Blue Sky is gonna be on my. It's gonna be showed on. It's probably gonna eventually be pinned on my Twitter. So yeah, yeah, you can find my work and you can see my work on in Deceiving. If you're looking to play the game, that's your complete choice, or look at the game online. I've done every effects in the game, and yeah, where can people find you? I guess, but they should know that by now.
yeah.
Mm.
Well, you can find me on my Twitter where I'm gonna post a link to this video. B Garmin VFX. I think there's a couple underscores in there, but I'll put it in the description. You can find me on this channel making more videos. I'm going to diversify my content some more, do some more interviews, probably do some VFX breakdowns and remakes, stuff like that. And I'll also jump back into tutorials. Think about the tutorials is like I'm coming up on the point where I've covered a lot, and at this point it's kind of just like using the skills you've learned throughout the whole series and making new things. So probably less inertia on those
Yeah.
types of videos where I'm like, how to make a fire, how to make some water. Like, you know a lot of this stuff by now. I will still do those occasionally. There are things I haven't talked about that I would like to, but it's probably going to be more broader content now and breakdowns and things like that, just to keep it fresh and
And
exciting.
you'll
So it's
get
not just a
a-
regular
and you'll
tutorial every
get
time.
new interviews soon too. Like you.
Yes, I'm aiming to have Chris Sayers as my next guest here.
Ooh.
I'm going to be talking to him soon to set up a time for that. Might even be filmed and recorded before this video's out. We'll see.
Ooh.
I'm gonna
Okay.
get this out soon.
Can't
So
wait for that. Well,
yeah. All right. Well, it's been a blast having you on here. This has been so much fun.
thank you. Well, yeah, I couldn't see time pass. Been at it for
Yeah.
we've been talking for like
It's like an hour and a half
yeah.
almost, and more than that one
Yeah.
before we were talking. So,
Yeah.
all right. Well, maybe I'll have you back in the future.
Yeah.
Talk more about
I'll break
stuff.
down VFX with you and tell them how I
Oh, that
wouldn't
would be
do
a
it.
blast.
Yeah. So
Yeah. All
cool.
right.
Have fun,
Sweet.
everyone.
Thanks so much for being on, and I will talk to you later.
Yeah.